Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following the latest gaming hardware. I'm Damon Hatfield. As always, I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of Podcast Beyond, and from Podcast Unlocked is Ryan McCaffrey. And earlier this week, Xbox announced the layoffs we've been expecting. The most significant restructure in Xbox history, they called it. 1,600 people lost their jobs on Monday. Another 1,600 will be laid off over the next year. At least 4 studios are leaving Xbox: Double Fine, Compulsion, Ninja Theory, and Undead Labs, but at least they weren't shut down. Arcane has entered a required consultation with its Works Council to review potential strategic options per French labor law. Some quotes from Asha Sharma's internal memo this week. Our business today is not healthy. In a typical year, we lost 64 cents for every dollar we invested. Today, in some parts of the company, work passes through as many as 14 layers of management. Our platform teams are 40% larger than they were at the start of this generation, even as our player base and playtime have declined. Xbox has many of the most beloved franchises in entertainment history, talented studios around the world, and we will return to growth in 2027. So Xbox is making big changes to try and turn things around. Throughout this generation, it has made numerous expensive acquisitions, most of which have not paid off. The number of Game Pass subscribers isn't anywhere near Xbox wanted it to be. So now over on PlayStation. It's had its own problems, both recently and throughout this generation. It has announced it will stop producing games on physical discs in early 2028. There's been a lot of disappointment around that decision, and it has perhaps already soured people on the PlayStation 6. But the narrative about PlayStation this generation consists of 2 branching storylines: that its pipeline of prestige, story-driven, single-player games has slowed to a trickle, and that has been chasing a white whale of live service multiplayer games that has resulted in disasters like Concord, years of misplaced effort from studios like Naughty Dog, which hasn't shipped a single new game this generation, and the costly purchase of Bungie, which, like so many Xbox acquisitions, hasn't paid off. Oh, and also purchased beloved studio Bluepoint and then shut them down before they could ship anything. So all of this adds up to people not really feeling great about this console generation. AAA developers seem to have completely forgotten how to make games. For the first time ever, hardware prices have gone up instead of down. Consoles are too expensive. The cost of games has gone up, first to 70, now to 80. Publishers kept one foot in last generation for too long, resulting in very few games that really felt like they were taking advantage of current gen hardware. Okay, that's enough for me. Let's get our panelists in here. Max, PlayStation had a disastrous start to the PS3 generation, but by the time the PS4 came around, it was known as the home for prestige AAA single-player games. And with one short video at E3 2023 showing how you share games on PS4, Sony blew Xbox's head off with a shotgun, and Xbox never recovered.
This is how you share your games on PS4.
Thanks.
PlayStation.
But it seems like Sony has spent the current generation squandering all that goodwill with gamers today. They don't feel like such a gamer-friendly company anymore. What say you?
Well, this console generation has been rough. I think even aside from Sony being back to the sort of the cocky, the hubris-filled Sony of the PS3 era, even aside from that, this console generation started off during a pandemic, which was going to be awkward no matter what. And then on top of that, we got the AI boom causing a chip shortage. Yeah, prices have gone up at the time in the console generation. They usually go down. Sony's made some choices here, but there have also been outside factors that have obviously forced their hand to a certain degree. It's rough, man. Like it's honestly hard to talk about this. Like we talk about next gen console watch, and right now I'm not excited about next gen. Next gen doesn't seem like it's been earned. It doesn't seem like there's a need for it. It doesn't seem like there's any motivation. Like we don't know anything about a PlayStation 6 aside from the likelihood that it's not going to be super friendly to people who like physical media. Maybe there'll be an add-on optical drive, but most likely they're pushing the digital only thing first and foremost, which, that's not really a selling point. That's like the lack of a selling point. Nobody I know, even if you're not a physical media enthusiast, nobody I know is excited about the absence of the option to use something. And that's ridiculous right there. And again, the moral of the story about the PS5, about the amount of cross-gen games, is you don't really need to be an early adopter of the next one, because they're going to have long tail support for PS5 games going into the PS6 lifecycle, presumably. And then, I guess the biggest motivator to buying a PlayStation 6 whenever that comes around is the fear that the price will go up like it's gone with the PS5. So, yeah. And again, there was this huge push at the top of the generation into live service, which was a gamble that did not pay off. And that wasn't just a Sony thing. We saw other publishers taking a very similar approach. And ultimately it comes down to spending, hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars on basically building a casino under the assumption that if you build it, they will come. But it's not as simple as just selling a game in a box and hoping people will buy it, which is easier said than done to begin with. It's the whole idea that you're competing for everyone's attention. In addition to money, it's also time. And I don't know, the fact that Sony was like, yeah, let's make 12 live service games.
Yeah.
No, who's going to get on board with that? So yeah, it's just, I'm sorry to be scattered here, but there's like a very long list of things that have sort of gone awry here. And right now, the worst thing that I could say about Sony is that they don't have any need to change, because like Xbox is clearly floundering on their own. I don't think they see Nintendo as a conventional competitor, because they're kind of doing their own thing over there. But yeah, so Sony's going to sell a whole lot of PS5s for GTA. They've already sold a whole lot of PS5s for Madden and Call of Duty and everything else. And they're ahead. They don't have any competition that's going to force them to change the beat of the drum they're marching to, whatever. They're doing their own thing over there. And Xbox is currently playing catch up. And yeah, I don't know. It would be nice if something happened that was humbling to them, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, Ryan, I want to get your thoughts on, just kind of the generation as a whole. But first, give us your reaction to this week's news about all the layoffs and saying goodbye to studios at Xbox. The news is still coming in. We're just learning about like id today, right?
Yeah, we knew that these layoffs were coming. They were telegraphed. That doesn't make it any better. I mean, it's nice to not be surprised, although I don't know how would be cold comfort to anybody that worked at Xbox that actually did get affected by this. But yeah, it is. The silver lining is that these 4 studios and a 5th that remains, you mentioned Arcane, is in limbo on account of, thank goodness they've got French labor laws, at least somewhat protecting them for the moment. But yeah, the other 4 studios that were on the chopping block, I am glad that Microsoft was able to work with studio leadership and help find them, in 2 of their cases, new owners, and in the other 2 cases, to reestablish them as independent studios and let them keep their IP. There is a historical precedent for that, which really I think is the ideal scenario for all 4 and potentially 5 of these studios. And that, well, at least the 2 independent ones for sure. And that is IO Interactive. Back in, well, for many, many, many years, IDOS owned IO Interactive, and they put out the Hitman games that IO would make. And then Square Enix merged with IDOS, and that created a bigger new publisher. And so Square was the caretaker and the owner of IO for a while. But eventually, Square decided they didn't want to be in the IO Interactive business anymore, the Hitman business anymore. But instead of shutting the studio down, they were able to negotiate with studio leadership, and IO spun back out independently, and was able to keep the Hitman IP. And sure enough, IO was able to revive and restore Hitman, arguably make it bigger and better than ever, with the more recent Hitman trilogy and the World of Assassination. And they were able to sign they used the success of Hitman to sign a deal with the license holders of James Bond to make the 007, what became 007 First Light. And that's off to a great start, selling a few million copies out of the gate and tons of critical acclaim. It's my pick for the moment, as we sit here now. It is my game of the year so far. And so that, to me, is the best case scenario for both Compulsion and also Double Fine as well. These 2 now freshly independent studios. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's that is the one bit of silver lining. But Max makes a great point that as horrible as recent times have been in the entire industry, it's not just about Sony or Microsoft necessarily, but and not to forgive anything that's gone on recently, but Max, you're right that this generation was kind of screwed from the start with the launching into a pandemic and the supply chain crisis that came along with that. It was tough to find consoles for a while, and then the whole AI boom, which, I mean, we can't Maybe Sony can claim innocence on that. Microsoft definitely cannot because they're a substantial investor in OpenAI, and thus they are a primary driver of this data center boom that is gobbling up all these hardware resources. But yeah, it's even if Sony and Microsoft had done everything right and not mismanaged the heck out of this generation, it would probably still be a pretty rough go right now for gamers, and we'd probably still be staring at super expensive hardware. Who knows what the game situation would be, but yeah, it's not been a fun ride, and I like Matt. I'm so lucky that I've been a gamer for most of my life, and I've always looked so forward to the next generation of hardware and the promise that it brought, but I genuinely have no enthusiasm for Helix or PS6. Not that they won't be great pieces of hardware, but it's just like nobody needs that right now. Like we're still sitting on, like, we haven't gotten a game from Naughty Dog, as Max mentioned. We haven't heard from the Elder Scrolls or Fallout on the Xbox side. Fable's only about to come back after over a decade away. So yeah, I don't know. It's I love this hobby and this industry, but it is a, dare I say, like a lost generation here.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, it's been a rough generation. We're 6 years into it, and there was only 7 years in between PS3 and PS4. So let's just imagine for a moment that we're at the halfway point. We're about to enter the back half of this console generation's lifetime. So a question for both of you. I generally see sentiment. This has just been a pretty crappy generation for console games, at least PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. So what would have to happen for things to turn around? So 10 years from now, the overall sentiment would be, that generation started out really rough, but they really turned around by the end. And I was really happy with the PS5 and Xbox Series X generation at the end. Max, what would have to happen? And is that possible?
Whew. I mean, making the consoles cheaper would be nice. Getting more people on board, because that's typically what happens at the tail end of a console generation. There's a lot of people who aren't willing to throw down $500 or $600 on a new console at launch. Are like, yeah, I'll throw $300 at it, or $200 or what have you. So that'd be cool. That seems like a long shot at this point. The other thing Sony could do is just, make some games that come out on PlayStation that you can only play on PlayStation. Or, I didn't have a problem with them putting games on PC. I have no issue with that. I just make some games that you can play with this thing. Because right now, there's plenty of stuff to play on there. But as far as this stable of PlayStation studios that earned this reputation, that got us excited about all of these, great first party exclusives. I mean, a lot of people will consider Last of Us one of the best games ever made. And what Naughty Dog's been doing, they're working on Intergalactic, that might come out at some point. But yeah, I worry that with this sort of arms race of hardware getting more high tech and having this, really trying to show off the infinite power of the PS5, kind of just lost the plot. And if it takes 7 years to make a video game, maybe re-examine what the video game should be. Some of my favorite PlayStation games have been these kind of almost half measures, these like side stories like Miles Morales or Uncharted Lost Legacy. It would be cool to see those make a comeback. If it does take studios 7 years to make a full-size game, then again, let's revisit that. Let's give more of a cadence to reminding people why they bought a PlayStation. What's the one thing that you really can't get anywhere else? Let's get some of that out there. And Wolverine's a step in the right direction. God of War, Lao Fei is looks rad. I hope there's more stuff coming down the pipe, and I hope it's coming at like a sort of a faster clip, because we've had these machines for a minute now, and it doesn't really quite feel like they've been taken full advantage of, or they've been pulling their weight. I will say this year has really started to feel like this is when they're starting to click. Like this is kind of the year where this generation, maybe not from the first party side of things, but is getting, I would compare it to like a 2015 or a 2011, when it's just, you get this kind of deluge of games that developers have had enough time to get familiar with the hardware, and they're really taking advantage of it and doing cool stuff. So I just hope Sony has more coming down the pipe at a faster clip.
We talk about this all the time, but it doesn't take Capcom 7 years to make games, so Mr. PlayStation should take Mr. Capcom out to lunch and ask him what the secret is. Ryan, they're doing all sorts of things behind the scenes at Xbox to try and turn things around. What scenario is there where they come out, or at least they come out of this generation getting people excited about the next Xbox?
Well, I have to echo Max to start with. It's getting the hardware price down, and I know there are all kinds of external forces there, but if we had $300, all right, even $350 Series X and PS5 right now,
yeah,
and then with the Series S maybe $200, like if we were getting more affordable instead of less, that would certainly go a long way towards it. But for Microsoft, they're entering the franchise first era, as I guess I would probably call it, where they funded a lot of new IPs and original ideas, both big and small, whether it's Starfield or Keeper or South of Midnight. Those kinds of things have been done, and they haven't sold. I know there's all sorts of other things you can point to, like Game Pass sort of teaching people to not buy games and just wait for it to hit Game Pass. There's a lot to unpack there, but the bottom line is that Microsoft is moving into a franchise-first future, which isn't all bad. I mean, it's been 11 years since we had a Fallout game. It's been 15 years since the last Elder Scrolls game. Mm-hmm. And so, if we can get more of Xbox's resources, and they still have a lot of great teams under their umbrella, whether it's Obsidian or InXile as just their other two big RPG specialists. If we see them all get together with Bethesda Game Studios and Todd Howard's team and do a Call of Duty-like sort of taking turns, everybody works on stuff at the same time in either Fallout or Elder Scrolls, and so instead of one every decade or decade and a half, one of those three talented studios is putting out a Fallout or an Elder Scrolls game every other year. Like that's where we're heading, and that's not necessarily all bad. But to answer your question of how does Xbox try to build some kind of positive momentum heading out of this generation and into the Helix generation, hardware price is definitely a big part of it. But as far as what they can control, they've got to have amazing games, and I guess a couple of those might be exclusive. Gears of War E-Day, that's got to be amazing. Not just great, not just super good, but amazing, like the original Gears of War trilogy was. Fable, same thing. Like, Fable has been gone for a long, long, long time. It's in Playground's hands now. Playground, in my humble opinion, is probably the most singularly, collectively talented studio that Xbox has in terms of what they've accomplished. And so if Fable is a 10 out of 10 game, not an 8, not a 9, it's got to be a 10 out of 10 game. And then Elder Scrolls 6 finally hits maybe right at the tail end of this generation in 2028 or so. It's not going to be sooner than that. But that's what it's going to take. Like, Xbox needs, like, they've been doing a great job, to their credit, of delivering good and very good games for the last almost 2 years now. But short of, really, the two standouts are Indiana Jones and the Great Circle and Forza Horizon 6. They just need more of those standout 10 out of 10 caliber games to try and build some momentum into the next gen. And if they really, I don't think this will happen because of hardware costs and what the hardware situation's looking like, but this thing with Sony of turning their backs on physical media, it's not going away for them, and it shouldn't. And I don't blame gamers for the reaction that they've had. If Microsoft really wanted to crack open a door to gamers that turned their backs on Xbox a long time ago, they could say, hey, you know what? We're fully committing to physical media. We're going to offer that built into every Helix. It'll be there for you as an option. If you want to do digital, great. But if you want to buy our games on discs, we're interested in preserving games. We were at the forefront of backwards compatibility and game preservation these last couple generations. that's another thing that they could do on the back of a objectively terrible decision by Sony.
Mm-hmm. You both make very good points. One thing's for sure, these are very challenging times for the industry. Viewers, I see your comments all the time. Just a general disappointment with this console generation. But we want to know, what is the worst part of this console generation? Is it rising hardware prices, a lack of exclusives, the live service push, mass layoffs, or subscription price increases? You can vote at IGN.com or on Spotify the day this episode goes live, and we'll share those results with you in next week's show. All right, real quick, it's time for a brand new month of gaming. Jump into the humble July Choice Bundle and score an amazing lineup of titles. Right now you can grab Sea of Stars Sunset Edition, Tunic, Neon White, Police Simulator, Patrol Officers, Drop Duchy Complete Edition, Sledders, Dicefolk, and our Adventurer Guild. This month's charity is Sandy Hook Promise, a national nonprofit organization that honors all victims of gun violence by turning tragedy into a moment of transformation. Their mission is to educate and empower youth and adults to prevent violence in schools, homes, and communities. Head to humblebundle.com through August 4th to start playing today. And that's our show. Thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes to make this show possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more of the latest gaming hardware. We'll see you then. This episode of Next Gen Console Watch was produced by Damon Hadfield, Jobert Atienza, and Sam Claiborne. Damon is also the host, and Max Scoville and Ryan McCaffrey serve as regular panelists. Technical direction is by Jobert Atienza, with technical production by Marian Franzen and Amir Rakib. Audio engineering is handled by Amir Rakib. Post-production editing is by Jobert Atienza, and graphic design is by Justin Vachon. Next Gen Console Watch is an IGN production and part of the Geek Media Network.